Hello and welcome to Do It Bad with Libby DeFranco.
Olivia Merwood, and our very special guest today, Tumi.
We have such a juicy fucking episode for you today. It's so good. I am so excited to bring to you this performance art posing as a podcast. Today we are between worlds. We will be honoring our very special friend, Tumi, who has entered a death portal and is currently residing in the underworld. Olivia and I, will be here on Earth contacting Tumi in Hades, in the underworld. And you get to join us on this wild and magical ride.
It's going to be a very special episode. We can't wait.
So, in speaking about Tumi in a death portal, I want to be very clear for all of us that while we are prone to the enthusiastic expressions of magic, Tumi still exists as a human in this plane. They're going through an energetic and metaphoric and existential death portal, but their body still resides in this plane. So don't worry about them being physiologically dead. They are spiritually and emotionally and existentially in a death portal, and they will join us from that space, which this is just super amazing. I'm so glad that we get to do this. In many of our cultures, in many Western cultures, and in sort of the hegemonic whitewashed culture that a lot of us live in, we are really bereft of ceremony. We are really bereft of magic. We are bereft of alchemical portals to process the complexity, the richness, the depth, and often the difficulty, but the magic and the beauty of being a human. And part of that is death. And I would say Olivia and I have both gone through our own death portals before, and definitely in the last year. So this is one that is really special and meaningful to me. And it is really special and meaningful for me to share with you all, because I know so many people have gone through a death portal or a dark night of the soul and haven't had anyone to talk to about it and haven't had any modeling about it. And so this is us sharing with you live through this beautiful experience some of the ways that we can make friends with death, be with death, and allow death to nourish us, and also give our nourishment to death. Yeah.
And for those that are maybe not as familiar with the death ritual, the death processes, it is a great moment to really ritualize change in your life when you are sort of noticing that you are becoming more of a different person, that maybe your gender identity is changing, maybe your values are changing, maybe like the direction in your life is changing. So often we can just move through these changes so quickly without taking the moment to actually grieve what we are losing, and to be excited and to ritualize and to create ceremony around us being rebirthed. So it is actually really beautiful to be able to look at metaphorical death within the process of life, to actually take a moment and see where we've been and where we are going. Bringing ritual to things. Yes. More rituals in life, please.
They are really super significant and important for human beings are storytelling creatures. And when we don't have a story, it's very hard for us to process things. So ritual allows us to give narrative to our experiences, and it allows us to mark it in our psyche in a way that allows us to bring healing. And we often celebrate the rebirth, but we are here to celebrate as well the death today. And we encourage you to be tender with yourself, be soft and sweet with yourself, give yourself time and space to process what we're doing here today. But give yourself permission to actually be with this moment and this thing that we hide and put in dark corners in many of our cultures. And today we're here to celebrate it. And we're here to celebrate Tumi. So, the other thing that I wanted to mention that's a super cool thing about this episode is that Tumi will be coming to us from the underworld. And so when we come to this earth with our soul has a much bigger perspective, like our whole self. Sometimes they call it the higher self, but Carolyn Elliot likes whole self, and I really resonate with that. It's a lot less bypassy, a lot less love and lighty, which is what we're here to do today. And so our soul has this bigger picture, this meta picture of what we came to the earth to do and what's important to us. And all of that gets channeled through our personality structure when we are a person, and through our values and our interests and our limited perspective as human beings. So one of the really cool things we'll get to do today is speak to Tumi as a soul in their soul form, and they can share with us some differences between their perspective as Tumi and their perspective as a soul. And they can give us some really amazing downloads on the difference between those things. So we'll be asking them to share with us the similarities and differences between their soul perspective and their perspective as the artist formerly known as Tumi. So we are super stoked to bring you this. And what we will do is we will start with a eulogy honoring Tumi. And then we will invoke Tumi as a séance. And then we will ask them lots of questions and hear their perspective and benefit from their wisdom and what they have to share. And then, as we do in the magic, we will banish them and bless them and bid them adieu. So buckle up for safety, buckle gently, be soft with yourself, be slow with yourself, pause if you need to. You know how to take care of yourself as a person, and you know how to resource yourself. So please, we invite you to do that and settle in when you're ready. So we're going to begin this magical process now. We are gathered here today to honor the life and the death of our dearly departed Tumi. Tumi was a powerful magician, a lover of sex and intimacy and bell hooks and the erotic, a student of somatics and a believer in the power of faith. They leave behind a legacy of shamelessness, devout pursuit of liberation, and total absolute adoration of the divine. As we lower them into their grave, we thank them for all of their profound contributions to the world, to our lives, and we bid them farewell as we cast a spell that all of their attachments from this lifetime may be washed away, leaving them free and empty. We will now have a moment of silence for Tumi and the magic and beauty that they wove in this world and our lives. May they be blessed as they blessed us. And now I will say a prayer for us. It's really important that when we do magic, we make sure that we surround ourselves with protection and state our intentions. So we'll do that for you now and for our ceremony now. Dios Madre, Dios Padre, Dios Espíritu Santo. In the name of Ischel, Mother of all creation, in the name of the 9 benevolent Maya spirits, Archangel Michael, Mother Mary, Isis, Hathor, Kuan Yin, Mary Magdalene, and Jesus Christ. To our spirit guides, spirit animals, our benevolent ancestors, the benevolent spirits of this land and the lands from which we come. I am the one who prays that you draw near and extend us your protection, your light, your holding in this moment. Give us safety, give us clarity, and make this ceremony a blessing to all involved. Be with us now and allow us to serve the higher will Allow us to nourish as we are nourished, to bless as we are blessed. Allow us to experience magic as we beget magic. I believe in the power of the prayers with all my heart. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Aho. And before they completely pass into the abyss and dissolve into the void, fully into the black, soft velvet nothingness that is all that is and that is no thing, we are going to invoke Tumi's presence one last time and have a conversation with them between the worlds. So now we will invoke Tumi. From beyond the grave, we summon you, O beautiful soul. From beyond
the grave, we request your presence in this realm.
From beyond the grave, we summon you.
Come to us and speak to us now.
Come to us and share your wisdom.
Come to us and bless us with your words.
We summon you now.
We summon you now.
We summon you now.
Did someone say my name?
Yes, we rang. We
You
rang from the earth realm.
Oh my goodness. I feel so honored. I was just drifting on my lazy river, and then I hear this voice, these familiar voices calling to me, and I'm like, are my friends on earth ringing me? Wow.
Yes. Yes.
So profound to be here with you both.
It is so wonderful to be with you too.
Thank you for honoring us with your presence. I'm so glad you answered the psychic telephone.
You know, you would be surprised how few people don't call down here. And they used to, like a couple thousand years ago, 2000 years ago, they would call, and now nothing. So I feel very honored.
Oh, well, wonderful. I hope that, well, do you want to talk on the phone? Like, how is the perspective in Hades? Do people want to chat?
I definitely want to chat. I feel a bit shy, like as I heard you calling me, because I remember from my time on Earth that humans are a bit icky about the whole self, but I trust you both, and I feel that I get to show up and be here with you today.
Yes, it is certainly part of our intention for this experience and this conversation with you, that we can dissolve some of the ickiness that some humans have about death.
Yes.
Wonderful. So, what's it like down there? What's it look like?
I was meditating on this earlier. I still meditate down here. And I've realized that in the same way that the earth realm appears differently to us all, Hades appears differently to us all. And I don't believe that there is an objective Hades in the same way that I don't think there's an objective earth. But I can tell you that for me, in this merry-go-round, it is like a slow drifting river with a few lights here and there, but mostly darkness.
I'm so curious, now that you're in Hades, what is your perspective on death?
I felt this a bit when I was Tumi as well, but now I think I know even more so that this thing that humans call death, this rite of passage, this initiation, this transfer, is really a profound other state of being that is equally as legitimate as what we call life or aliveness. And that has been very profound as a shift for Tumi. When I say I'm speaking about whole self, but I will reference Tumi and their perspective occasionally. And for Tumi, it's like, whoa, I don't think they expected this to be as legitimate of a state as what they thought of as aliveness.
Mm.
Mm.
So what was the spiritual death process like for Tumi?
They had practiced,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that made things easier for this time. We've of course died a million times before, so they had practiced in that way. But as Tumi, they were really kinkily interested in just practicing and practicing and practicing for this moment. And so when this invitation into death came, it was actually quite easeful. And I think, you know, if I feel into their perspective for a bit, because I'm detaching from that slowly, but as I feel into their perspective, it was really it was a gentle releasing, and it was a gentle surrender, and it was a trusting actually in the familiarity of Hades and the comfort of Hades and the beauty of Hades that made the transition really easeful for them. So I think they died a beautiful death, and they are supremely proud of that.
That feels so good to hear you say. I think we have so few narratives of beautiful death.
Mm.
So thank you for bringing that perspective. That just feels like nourishing.
Mm. Mm.
Food for the soul.
Food for the soul. Yeah, because I think, just to share a bit more about like the big eye perspective, we all dream about our beautiful deaths, especially before we come down into incarnation. It's like that is as much of the process as our beautiful births. But as humans, we seem to get really like about that bit of the story, and we forget that we have dreamed of dying a beautiful death. And so I'm glad that we can sit here and revel in that beauty.
Is there a moment that you remember that Tumi remembers dying?
Funnily that we speak about Carolyn, because Carolyn, our darling Carolyn Elliot, benevolent bodhisattva, was definitely a big executing force, I want to say, for Tumi. Like they were the executioner, and very compassionately offered to take Tumi's life. And Tumi said, yeah, you know what, I would actually be into that. This seems like a good time for me to go through that. And they did it in a secret way. They had secret pacts, and you know, they can't speak about that, and we respect the mysteries. But I think Tumi really wanted someone that they trusted to move with them through the death. They didn't want to go through it alone. That was like big for them. And when they found Carolyn, they knew that they had found their benevolent murderer, and they were very deeply grateful for that.
Just to say here, Carolyn Elliot is a teacher of magic and the creator of existential kink, and is Carolyn Elliot one of Tumi's teachers? Fantastic, yes.
Yeah, it's getting hot here in Hades. I needed to take off a layer.
Appropriate.
Appropriate, yeah.
It's getting hot in her.
Yeah, I can tell y'all it's hot down here. You get cooked. But in the best in the best ways possible.
That's so beautiful. A benevolent murderer. How sweet. Like I love
How
this
so sweet.
Yeah. I love the tongue-in-cheek concept. I think Olivia and I have spoken about existential kink, and I think we've both taught it in our teachings in a way. But I would love to hear your wholer self's perspective on existential kink. I don't believe we've spoken about it on the podcast before, so this might be new for people.
Oh, this is amazing. Tumi loved sharing about existential kink in their lifetime. They were just like obsessed. And from my big eye perspective, I think that existential kink is taking spirituality on planet Earth further than any human organization has been able to take it up until now. And maybe I'll say any human organization that's been public. There have been tons of secret mystery cults that have done all kinds of wonderful things. But in the public eye, existential kink is really answering some tough questions that humans have about the nature of God. And so for those people listening who are like, oh, what's existential kink? Really, it's this body of work that my benevolent murderer has created. That is about, in its most expansive form, seeing God in all things. And Carolyn will use the language of really being willing to get off on everything, being willing to approve of everything. But really what existential kink is about is disconnecting from the limited I, the small I, the ego, and starting to identify with the whole I, the bigger self, the larger self, the long self, the whole self, and see absolute divinity and beauty and God in all things, including and especially those things that we look at and say, there is no God here. That is very bad and should not be happening. And so that is what makes it so profound for humans right now, when there's so much violence on planet Earth and so many challenging experiences that people just don't know how to integrate. Existential kink is pointing towards a path of integration that is vitally important in the evolution of human consciousness.
Love that description. Thank you so much for sharing.
And for our beloved listeners, part of the key practice of existential kink is understanding that, as in kink, we may be sexually fulfilled by or interested in or playful about something that we do not ostensibly want on the face of it. So do I want my partner to control my actions in general life? No, not really. Some people are more interested in that taking a larger perspective for them, and some people do live that for much of their life. But I do enjoy that in a sexual setting. So that is a way that we explore an expression of ourselves that doesn't need to become our larger self. And existential kink is the same with emotions and desires for life experiences, in that I, as a personality structure, do not wish to experience scarcity and having a lack of money, or relationship drama, or needing to flee a country that I lived in and loved. But my wholer self may have a craving for experiencing that and finding out what it feels like. And so as a practice, existential kink is giving yourself space to have the experiences that you desire to have existentially kinkily when you don't want them to be your whole life. So that may be me lying on the ground for 20 minutes and feeling really, really poor and destitute, so that does not then color my life and take my life hostage. So I allow my desire a place to live, to be expressed, to be safe, to be free, so that does not then run my life as a covert dictator. So it's a very cool thing. And it's really magical to hear your wholer self's perspective on it. That was like a sermon.
And I want to share also from my perspective, like, Tumi was so judgy of me when they were alive. They really could not understand the things that I was getting off on. They were just like, oh my God, can you stop that? And now that we're transitioning together, and in some ways I'm initiating them through this transition, so that they can peacefully dissolve and die, and I can take them across the abyss, they're starting to understand, oh, there was so much more to this picture than I believed. There was so much more to my wanting and my desire. And existential kink lets us do that without dying a physical death. You know, that's why from this side, 10 out of 10 would recommend everyone start practicing, because you'll go through the process when you die, but you can also go through it as an alive being.
Microdose death.
Existential kink, microdose death.
Yeah. Wonderful. I'm really curious, you know, you must have been through so many deaths and many iterations of your personality. I'm curious if you would like to share about any other death experiences that you had while existing as a person, or any other death portals that Tumi had that you would like to share about.
Yeah, Tumi had tons of death portals. They just like this lifetime obsessed. And one of their favorites was last year. They really enjoyed like the hospital arc, like things that would bring them into a hospital. And they had taken this dose of psilocybin mushrooms and they were having a bad trip. It was so cute. And they were just like, this is the worst thing that has ever happened. And they were in the underworld and they did not like it. They were like, get me out of here. I don't want to be here. You guys are just like, how dare you? There are no boundaries here. They kept saying that, which I also thought was so adorable, because they were running around the house being like, there are no boundaries here. There are no boundaries. And it's like, there are no boundaries in the underworld and there's no separation. And they had this amazing experience. You know, they did not think so at the time. But they had this wonderful experience of being in the underworld and being with all these beings and having all these snakes like surrounding them and like engulfing them, and then they ended up in the hospital, and they had this experience actually of realizing they kept, when they were in the hospital, it was so fascinating to watch. They were like, I want to die, I want to die, I want to die. And then they were begging not to die. They were like having like a whole thing, and it was like, whoa, make up your mind. But they were in both places. And then they realized that a part of them was not fully committed to being alive, and that they had been hovering, like they could feel this hovering that had been happening, where they were just like unwilling to fully be in their body and be fully incarnated. And when they were in that hospital, they actually had this beautiful moment of choosing to live. They've been so obsessed with death, but this was a moment of choosing life and saying, like, I'm actually going to be here in this body fully, and walked away from that really transformed. But also with a more tender understanding of what life is like down here, which I think has eased their transition. So that was like one fun little death that they went through.
I'm just absolutely sitting here like goosebumps, fully stunned. Like I've had a very similar mental experience of that, not the same sort of like physical experience, but wow, just yes. That must have been such an experience for them.
Yeah, they were really, I think that's where it's fun from my perspective, because I'm delighted by it all. I'm like, like, look at this, now you're going to the hot, oh my goodness. And now you're screaming at this person, and you're telling this one that they were projecting onto all the hospital staff and being like, they were fully in their darkness, and they were looking at this one member of their family who they felt was embodying light, and they were just screaming like, you've abandoned me. And they were playing out this like cosmic arc of being like, you've abandoned me, you've abandoned me. And like and I was delighted by it all. I was like, wow, where's the story going to go next? You know, they were not so delighted by it. Their family was definitely not so delighted by it. They did not think that it was all that fun. But from my perspective, it's like, what a rich story to tell, you know, what rich themes to draw on, what rich places to learn in. And I think that's something I really want people to know, is that like from this perspective, it's all so beautiful. It's all so beautiful. And when Tumi was on Earth, they really had like a limited capacity for experiencing beauty. and that's what existential kink helped them to expand a little bit. Like they were willing to look at a narrow range of human experiences and say that's beautiful, or earthly experiences and say that's beautiful, but expanding now, especially in death, they have more room to see the beauty in everything, and that has been really deeply transformative for them. And it's what they want for all beings. I think as they dissolve, and like that's the transmission they want this I to carry forward.
It really sounds like for Tumi, they sort of like they were half in, they were half out, and then actually being able to actively make the choice. To actually experience the one side of being half in of the death, and then to actually then fully launch themselves into being alive, like the choice to be alive, like the active choice, not the passive choice, but the active choice to be alive must be so, so powerful. And just like, blown away. I'm blown away. You've changed my life. I don't say that lightly. I really don't. I really don't. Wow.
I've never heard Olivia say that actually in this way. I now am so kinkily curious. So just one thing that I have been pondering over is, you know, our human biology, and how our human biology can be at odds with our soul intention. So when you're speaking about wanting to die, that feels like maybe a soul desire to want to have like the depth and richness and complexity of that experience. But the human physiology keeps us alive at all costs. And I'm really interested in like what that experience was like.
It's interesting that you say that, because I remember Tumi felt a lot of contrast in that part of their life. Like there would often be this voice that was just, and they learned to really make friends with it. There was always like this impulse to die, and at first they took it really seriously, and then they realized like, oh, there's just more of an existential death wanting to happen here. It's not a physical death, because their body would often, even in this death, resist intensely, vehemently. Because I think, and what they're telling me now is that there's almost an instinctive fear of death as they understand it, but also an instinctive desire for death, which kind of points to this existential link between fear and desire, that like we are, or as humans, there seems to be this repulsion, aversion, and desire and moving towards that exist in an interesting polarity. And I think that happens with the body. I think that really has, and I'm more hearing from them, because I don't actually think about bodies all that much. I'm like, wow, that's fascinating. But I'm checking in with them, and they're kind of saying that like, oh, it's actually, yeah, there's like this push-pull towards death. We're programmed to desire death and also to fear death and protect ourselves from it. So that is an interesting perspective that they're offering me, because I kind of, because I'm so friendly with with what humans call death, like I really don't think about these dramatic things that happen in the human body. I'm like, la la la. I just like telling my stories. But thank you for asking that, because that almost gives me a little more compassion for Tumi and the other human selves that I've incarnated in and as.
I'm so interested if there's more you would like to share about the fear and desire vortex.
Well, this is something I will say, what I'm finding as I move through my own initiation with death is that even as a whole self, sometimes there are things that I don't know And I didn't expect it would be so. I thought that I would know everything. And there are parts of the dream that I'm like, wow, I'm still curious about that. I'm still learning. And it's why I keep coming back into incarnation, because I'm like, I want to find out more. And this fear desire thing has been bringing me into incarnation a lot, I will say. And my sense of it is that there's something deeply magnetic in both of those experiences. They're very intense, the intense wanting and the intense not wanting, but they exist. And I think this is where, and I'm seeing if I can find the words for this, but ultimately they're the same thing. But from a human perspective, they seem different. I'm seeing like a kind of like yin and yang symbol where, but it ultimately is like one leads into the other, and they are both inside one another. There is a wholeness of those two experiences. But as humans, often, and I know Tumi did this, which I thought was so cute, they'd be like, fear bad, desire good. And they would avoid the things that they feared and move towards the thing that they desired. But at the same time, what they began to realize at the end of their life was they were moving towards the things that they feared as much as they were moving towards the things that they desired. And that really was also something that Carolyn brought in for them, that like, oh, these things that Tumi said they really did not want, or like they were really afraid of, they had so much intrigue about. And I think from my perspective, it's just because I'm eternally curious. Like, I'm not thinking about good and bad and like these really human moralistic terms. Like, I'm just so curious. I want to experience everything, literally everything and anything. But when I'm in a body, I find that whoever my incarnate self is, like, they tend to be like, ugh. And sometimes they don't want me to explore my curiosities, or they shame me, or like, slap me on the wrist for exploring my curiosities. But that's some of what I'm playing with right now as I move through this, as I move through my own initiation here.
This reminds me of the research around in human bodies that excitement physiologically has the same body markers as anxiety. And it is really a matter of interpretation. And yeah, I'm just really feeling that resonant with what you're saying. Like, from a human perspective, that makes so much sense with what you're saying, because it is very easy to confuse anxiety and excitement, and fear and desire feel like a larger aspect of that. It feels merely on the same continuum, merely an expanded version, a more intense experience of anxiety. Anxiety is part of fear, and excitement is part of desire. So that feels very interesting for us humans to play with, that they are maybe the same experience from a different perspective.
And I think where Tumi is telling me now that, like, what Carolyn would say is that it's all arousal, it's all turn on, and that it all does exist in the same part of the body. and it's really a matter of, as you said, how we interpret it, and also, as Carolyn would say, whether we approve of it, right? That like fear is desire that we haven't approved of yet. Anxiety is arousal and excitement that we haven't approved of yet. So the human task is to give conscious approval to everything.
And I can see, in the, you will be familiar, I'm sure you had an incarnation at this time, that in ancient Greece, they're often putting coins on the eyes of bodies when bodies had departed from the mortal realm. And I can see the coins on the eyes, I can see them having fear and desire. And that being like a powerful reminder of that. And it also reminds me that in some, there's a healing modality called somatic experiencing, which talks about our nervous system responses. And essentially, they're like a spiral in a vortex. Like we're never having one nervous system response. Maybe we're having fight and freeze, or maybe we're having fight and regulation, and they're in a swirl, and they can kind of just like almost at times quantum hop onto the other aspect. So as you're sharing that, I'm just seeing this picture of like, okay, we've got the swirl of fear and desire, but we can actually like collapse the quantum wave of fear and observe it in desire, because they're actually all in a vortex together. Yeah, that feels very cool and very interesting.
Yeah, Tumi's getting excited about that. I can hear them. They're like, ah! These are things that they loved in their lifetime. And they're thinking about a teacher, Louise Mojica, who is a, you know, wonderful, they're like getting so excited. They're like, oh my God, you have to tell them. And I'm like, okay, I will tell them. They're telling me about this teacher, Louise, who speaks a lot about, because one thing that happens, especially now, I think Tumi's telling me this, that like a lot of people look at fight and flight as like bad, or trauma as bad. And so that is another place where they're telling me there's more room for humans to go into that neutral place of just seeing charge, just seeing turn on, just seeing arousal, just seeing activation. And I know humans love meaning making.
Yes.
But it also feels like there's room potentially, and maybe this is something I'd love to do in a next incarnation, is to think about how we neutralize those ideas and just see the underlying charge, which is the arousal, the turn on.
Yes.
The God current.
Ooh, the God current. I have Luis's record in my front room. They also make music, for those of you who don't know. They're a very, very cool nervous system teacher. They also incorporate a lot of magic, and they also make music, and they have their record, which is very cool. I like them a lot. I'm also so curious what death rituals Tumi practiced, and what rituals you have in the underworld.
Yeah, Tumi loves drama. They are just like absolutely love drama, love ritual, love theater. So they really have enjoyed like playing out their death very dramatically, and having friends eulogize them, and retreating to their little death chamber and cocoon, and losing their name. They love losing a name. That's like one of their favorite ways to honor death, is just to be like, wow, there's no name anymore. And yeah, I think they're, but right now, and some of their death rituals are secret too, you know, because they love their little cults, and they love their little mystery schools, and but at the moment they're really enjoying the dramatic reenactment or enactment of death. And actually what they found really nourishing in that, they're telling me, is getting to practice being present with death has been the thing that's been nourishing for them. Because they actually they realized, this was like a fun existential kink realization that they had, was that they believed that they wouldn't die. And then they had a moment where they realized for the first time that there was no other way that this was going to end, and it broke their heart. They were just devastated, like truly crying, grieving, like absolutely gutted by this realization. And then they realized, speaking about the body, these human bodies are so interesting, they realized that there was all this fear in them about like, I don't fucking know what to expect. I have no idea what's gonna happen. And they really love control. So they were just like, but they found that practicing death and practicing being present in death, and even enrolling other people into their death, and like asking friends to play out their death with them, has been really nourishing in learning to be present in that final moment. And so that really has been their big ritual. And then did you ask about my rituals, or which ones we have in Hades? We also love drama in Hades. and we get to do like really big cosmic, like epic, bringing in archangels with their swords, people getting like, juicily beheaded. Like we get to play out like really big cosmic dramatic stuff, which is really wonderful. And yeah, that is one thing that I will say has been really lovely for me being back here. Because on Earth, I remember when I was in Tumi and I was feeling a bit limited, and I was like, this is kind of boring, but okay, whatever, we're going to do what we're going to do. But now that I'm back here and I'm back in my fuller, wholer self, I can really lean into the depth of dramatic enactment. And also non-dual killing, because we don't have so many, hang-ups about killing here. So you get to die the perfect death for you. And that's part of how you're initiated into Hades, is you die your perfect death, and you get all the angels to be part of your little, cosmic role play, and then you move on.
So interesting. I notice, like, as a human, I notice my like come up about that. So I'm just like noticing and being present with that, the parts of death that I feel like interested in and approval of, and the parts that I feel not in approval of. And I was thinking, as you were talking about like the perfect death, of course, like the perfect death for anybody, that's like, it's hard for me to conceptualize what the perfect death is. But obviously, like someone having their perfect cosmic death is like, it's just correct. It's just truth with a capital T. But I find myself thinking about sort of societies that happened some time ago on Earth and their death rituals, and how those always seemed really barbaric to my personality, and that I wasn't ever hot to embrace the beauty in those, and that I still find that frictiony for me as a personality. So it's interesting and nice, interesting, intriguing. Feels encouraging to be exposed to that perspective. So thank you for
Yeah, I almost, if you'd like to share, I wonder if you've ever thought about what your most perfect death would be.
I don't think that I have. I think that maybe my conceptions of what a perfect death would be is painless and something I wouldn't be conscious of. So I think that quite often what I was heard and enculturated to was that a good death is a death where you are unconscious to the dying.
I'm definitely a lover of drama, so I think my perfect death would be as dramatic as possible.
Oh yeah.
Say more.
Oh, I think like, wouldn't it be so wonderful to just sort of like die screaming?
Cannot relate.
It's the kinkster in me. The pleasure and the pain, the drama, the screaming. I think I would be loud and dramatic, and I'd want a crowd.
Oh, so juicy.
Oh, and this is like bringing me this fun exploration of like, sex can be a taste of death. And I'm like, do I want because I'm thinking about how sex can be a taste of death. I'm like, do I want a peaceful death? Because man, Libby loves to scream during sex. This is great. I'm now feeling like I'm going to say this on a podcast, but you know what? I am. And I also feel like literally no one who knows me will be surprised by that, but it feels like a little tender or a little like edgy. But yeah, I'm thinking like the way that I enjoy to experience sex, if that is a taste of death, is that true? So that opens such an interesting exploration for me.
I mean, I guess it is kind of like the similarities between sex and death. I mean, we've talked about this, Libby and I, but just sort of like there's that pleasure pain element, but also like the erotic being in defiance of death, but also I guess like in the same thing about fear and desire, it's sort of like it's on that same spectrum. And we look at the way that like people that are kinky might show up in sex. I mean, I was out last night using a rubber knife. Doing all sorts of fun things like during sexy times, you know. These sorts of things can really bring us to the edge of our vulnerability, to the edge of ourselves, where we have to drop that human mask and become like our most full vulnerable selves. And that happens in death, and that happens in sex, and it can be humiliating, and it can be vulnerable, and it can be just like so overwhelmingly intense. And yeah, you can really like, you know, you sit down and you look at these comparisons. I'm so glad you brought that up.
And Tumi's whispering this thing to me about like the 8th house in astrology being ruling both sex and death, and that death is, and from my perspective, death is incredibly erotic. Death is so erotic.
Would you like to say more about that?
I'm wondering if I can. I'm feeling like those words so strongly. But I think, once again, in the way that humans can narrowly see, they see the erotic as this little thing, but the erotic is everything. It's aliveness, and aliveness is also met and coupled with and part of death. There's no disconnecting them. And Eros flows through all of these experiences. And so I'm really feeling, and maybe that'll also be part of my next incarnation, just this like desire for people to experience the deep eros of death. Tumi was really obsessed with this in their lifetime too, because they realized like they would have these experiences of being like, that would feel so good, like, and they love drama, so they think about like, I don't know, being like splat open and they'd be like, that would feel so orgasmic. And that was very confusing for them, because they were like, this doesn't make sense with my perception. But I think now that I'm having conversations with them and they're getting to see things from my perspective, they can see just how orgasmic it gets to be. And I feel very jealous of like the different ways that people have died. I just want to die in all the ways. That's why I keep coming to Earth, because I just want to keep dying in all the ways. And there are so many beautiful ways to die. And like you, Olivia, I personally, and like your HGA or your whole stuff, I love drama. I've loved the deaths almost the most. My favorite deaths have been the ones where I've been screaming, burned, flayed, where I've just had these very dramatic, violent things happen. And from my perspective, it's like waking up from a dream. It's like waking up from a bad dream. You die, and then it's like, oh, okay, it's fine. That was actually okay. From the human perspective, it feels like it would be the worst thing ever. But from this perspective, it's just like, oh, it was just a dream. And then that was actually kind of a wildly erotic, turned on, crazy, chaotic dream. I'm glad I dreamed it.
when we talked earlier about microdosing death and ceremony, I have this idea now that sex is microdosing death. And that just feels so, I'm not sure what else there is to say about that. It just feels like it wants to be like, there's something for everyone to put in their mouth and let it melt and chew on it and explore it and see what comes to them about it. So our podcast in the human realm is called Do It Bad. And Do It Bad is our invitation, our flirtation, and our like winking challenge to the world that before you are good at something, you are bad at it. And if something is worth doing, you will need to do a crappy job at it in order to become good at it. And so Do It Bad is this very intentional, like, do it bad. If it's worth doing bad to do it well. And it is intentionally,
it's a love letter to bravery, I think.
Yeah. And it is intentionally grammatically incorrect for me and Olivia, who are both Virgos. It's a meta invitation. So I'm really interested in what Tumi was doing bad, if Tumi would like to share about that, and what is the underworld take on doing it bad?
I'm gonna call Tumi into the room to be like, sweetie, what were you doing bad? Because from my perspective, like, there really isn't doing it good, doing it bad. There's just doing it. But from their perspective, they really felt they were doing relationships bad. Like, they really were like self-flagellating with that in their life, which was super fun for them. But they really felt like they were loving badly and connecting with other humans badly and being themselves badly. I actually think that's their biggest one, that they felt like they were doing it bad, was being themselves. And they really struggled with figuring out how to do that well. And I don't think they ever figured it out. And then they died. So, that's an unresolved thing, but I think they feel good about that now from this perspective. I think from my perspective, like, doing it bad is fun. Like, actually, like, it feels kind of like a goal down here to be like, ooh, do it bad. That feels like a fun invitation. It's also, Tumi's telling me that Carolyn would say this thing like, do it if you're bad. And it's reminding them of that, like, this invitation to be bad, to be naughty. But for me, I've incarnated millions of times as millions of creatures and experienced so many cycles of evolution. And I loved everyone. I loved every conscious and unconscious form that I took, from being a mycelial network to being a scorpion to being a pre-human ancestor to being a Homo sapien. And then I know, to being a dolphin, to being like, I know that there's also so many more incarnations that I can get to experience. But from my perspective, evolution only happens because of the willingness to do it bad. Like, that is the whole thing. And as a whole self, as God, I have been eternally willing to do it bad, so that there can be beauty and life and death, so that all of it could happen. And all of it only happens from this willingness. And so that's also something like I hear, because I'm using the language of do it bad just to kind of humor our human audience. Because for me, it's like, it's just doing it. It's doing it. It's being willing to do. And I'm grateful for everything and every incarnation where I've died shittily, where I've been like, that was a mediocre death, or that was a mediocre life, or, we didn't really use that incarnation the best way that we could have, we could have done more. It was part of the process. It was part of the evolution. And you can be here today, and Tumi could be here on Earth because of the willingness of every single being that I have come here as to do it bad. So I would say that's my underworld perspective.
Sexual groaning sounds. Okay, so we have been so appreciative of you being here with us and allowing us to honor Tumi and bringing Tumi's perspective. And to close this beautiful experience, what do you recommend that humans can do to make friends with death and to nourish themselves in death and be nourished by death?
One of Tumi's favorite practices was to see themselves walking with their death every day. And whether they personified this as Hades, like I'm walking with Hades every day, or whether it was just a more nebulous kind of like etheric body of death. But walking with their death every day was really helpful for them, especially in the last year of their life. They found that having that presence be there, not turning away from it, because there's that impulse to become unconscious towards death, to put it away as a thing that is not spoken about, is not addressed. But for them to actually walk with this mystery and to let it infuse their aliveness, because that is what Hades offers humans, is you can walk with me each day, and that can contribute to how much you grab this day, how much you decide to be alive in this moment, how much you choose to seize it. And so that's one thing I would say for any humans who are experiencing their aliveness, to walk with death, to really invoke that presence every day, to refuse to leave presence with it, because it's ever present. And it's just the human that either closes their eyes or opens their eyes towards it. And I would also say in that, having an altar to death, having some kind of physical structure to ground in that energy and to invoke it when it needs to be invoked, right? Because there are ways that this energy can support the human experience, to compost, to release. It's a part of life. And so I guess my last thing would be to speak about death, with your friends, to speak about your perfect death, to make death a regular part of life. Not this scary, awful thing that happens, but this beautiful thing, this beautiful final initiation that we get to be led through. And so I guess that's the final thing, is seeing that there is a lineage of ancestors. Every being that has ever lived has died, and they're waiting for you after your beautiful death. And I think if more humans could remember that as they walk through life, to remember that they won't be alone in those final moments, because that's what a lot of humans are afraid of, is the aloneness and the fear of being alone in that, but they won't be alone, and that they can begin to cultivate a relationship with death, so that when that moment comes and they breathe their last breath, they can do so with peace and with reverence and with gratitude.
Hmm. As you share that, I'm recalling that the brain chemicals we have in the process of birth are the same as the brain chemicals that we are awash with when we die. And I'm given this picture of when we are birthed into this realm, we die to the death realm. And when we are birthed into the death realm, we die to this realm. And with death, birth, and with birth, death. And in life, death persists, and in death, life persists.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here with us today. We are really looking forward to your next incarnation. And I am sure that everyone listening will be watching and reverent and appreciative and in awe and fascinated and intrigued and kinkily excited. And I would encourage you in your resistance to be curious. And if you have any last things to share, we would invite that now.
I think not. I think I'm ready to go into the abyss.
Beautiful. From the depths of our hearts, deep gratitude for you and for this experience. May you go and dissolve into the velvety black softness that is no thing. May you become a quantum wave until you pop into existence in your next observation. And may you be greatly blessed as you have blessed. And now Olivia and I will banish you to Hades, where you wish to be. So we will read together the banishing words. As our time together is complete, we banish you now. With our thanks, may you return to the underworld. Return now, return to death. Return now, return to death. Return now, return to death, that you may be reborn. The ceremony is complete, and the energy is now closed. Thank you so much for joining us for this delightful, delicious, and magical exploration with the whole self that oversees Tumi, who was a magical human being whom we are grateful to know, and whom we are grateful to know the next iteration of. And thank you so much for being here with us and absorbing this truly insightful, deep and magical, healing and nourishing, provocative and delicious, sexual and kinky insight that was shared with us. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
Until next time.